I think there was a big change coming about because Universalists were very Christian in their orientation, and the Unitarians prior to that were very Christian in their orientation as well, although not Trinitarian. That's the name, Unitarian. But there was this Winchester Profession of Faith that was written, and the original one was written in 1803.
Article 1. We believe that the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament contain a revelation of the character of God. Article 2. We believe that there is one God whose nature is love, revealed in one Lord Jesus Christ. Article 3. We believe that holiness and true happiness are inseparably connected, and that believers ought to be careful to maintain order.
The 3 articles of the Winchester Profession of Faith were barely 100 words long. But even so, it also contained a liberty clause, which allowed individual churches to alter it to fit their own needs.
Yet while we adopt a general profession of belief, we leave it to the churches and societies to continue or adopt within themselves such more articles of faith as may appear to them best under their particular circumstances, provided they do not...
They tried hard when writing this profession of faith to avoid any adoption of existing creeds. They still wanted to be a non-creedal religion. But one delegate worried that even though this profession seemed harmless, like a calf whose horns have not yet made their appearance, it would soon grow older, its horns would grow, and then will begin to hook. Now he was right, because eventually Universalists began to question this profession, and in fact in a later version they removed the Liberty Clause.
One of the leaders admitted that the removal of the clause deviated from the intention of the Winchester Profession, turning it into a kind of creed. Removing the Liberty Clause was a way to let the world know that Universalism was not the church of all outdoors, that it had a heritage of recognized beliefs.
So we were trying to be more mainstream.
Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross.
The other main Universalist church in the area is the First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, that settlement across the way. The preacher there is Reverend James Harvey Tuttle.
Tuttle, I think, if you look at pictures of Tuttle, he looks a very stern, biblical, forbidding kind of man. He believed in God as a creator, and that God was personally involved in the workings of humankind. And I think he thought his mission was to instill people in that belief.
James Tuttle was himself a very charismatic minister, powerful in the pulpit, powerful in the community, powerful in his personal relationships. Still, right from the beginning, there is no sense of connection or fellowship between these two brilliant ministers.
Bisbee was enamored of this whole natural selection and evolution theory, which was quite the rage at the time. And he engaged in a series of public lectures in Minneapolis, which came to be known as the Minneapolis Radical Lectures, in which he promoted his theories and he refuted the sermons of the Reverend Tuttle.
The Origin of Species had just been published in 1859. It wasn't that old. It was terribly controversial.
So I think there was always that tension there, and as the Universalists became less and less Christian in their belief, they began to believe in the worth of all people and the worth and value of all religious teachings. That was seen as a threat, I think, by the mainstream Christian denominations, that if you weren't only adhering to biblical truths, then you were pretty out there.
Tuttle either has not been exposed to transcendentalism, evolution, or he's just not buying it.
As a consequence, it was natural that people like Dr. James Tuttle, the minister of First Universalist Church in Minneapolis, would react to Bisbee's activities, because Bisbee's activities served to undermine Dr. Tuttle's credibility as a community leader in this city.
Tuttle did respond with his own series of lectures. The competing lectures between these two prominent men were so popular that large venues like Minneapolis's Pence Opera House were needed to hold the crowds, and area newspapers reported both sides of the conflict.
So there's these radical lectures going on in the early 1870s, and they're drawing huge crowds. I think you have to understand that there was no TV, radio, internet. This was great entertainment.
I think that Dr. Tuttle understood himself in responding to Herman Bisbee's sermon with a sermon of his own as defending the traditional position of Universalism, including its affirmation of the Christian scriptures. Once he did so, he in effect returned the volley against Herman Bisbee, and then the conflict between them became very public, very hostile, and there was no turning back.
There is something in man besides chemical properties, life the chemist cannot give. How do these materials come together so as to produce life? A watch we know is made of metals, but it required the watchmaker to construct it and give it proper conditions. So it required a God to form the human body, and when formed, a God must give it life. The watchmaker can regulate the motions of his watch, but the Almighty, in the view of these scientists, cannot regulate any of the incidents connected with the universe which he made. How can we trust a deity such as that? What guarantee would we have that the world would not end in failure?
Tuttle did not believe that humans evolved from any other life forms, and nor did he believe that humans had improved in any moral sense. Bisbee, of course, thought that we had evolved and that we had changed in our morals and we were becoming better and better.
Let me ask you which watchmaker you would feel most confident in. The one who constructed a watch that did not need interfering with? Or the one who constructed a watch that required setting every 24 hours or repairing every month? On what is our confidence based that the world will not end in failure? Certainly not the idea that God will come down and mend matters as often as they get out of repair, but that he so made it in the first place that it never gets out of repair.
He was inviting the controversy, and he came into Minneapolis to have that series of lectures. He came into Tuttle's own backyard to do it. And he denied the existence of miracles. He denied the infallibility of the Bible. Those were widely held Universalist beliefs at the time. So he pointedly attacked Tuttle, and he continued to preach on unorthodox topics in his Sunday sermons. Meanwhile, Tuttle was still preaching topics on the origin of man taken from the text of Genesis, and even a sermon called On Miracles.
So what Bisbee is doing is he's starting to read the Bible in a way that maybe Tuttle isn't. And it's all very well to question the Bible. They certainly had questioned slavery. The Universalists had no time for that. Yet slavery is in the Bible. And I think someone like Tuttle would be saying, well, what if we just question everything? What if we throw the whole thing away? Bisbee never wanted to throw away the Bible, but I think he wanted to question certain things, and he didn't necessarily see evolution as being anti-biblical. Tuttle said that we came from the Garden of Eden and we were made in God's image, and that's that. That's all you need to know.
How delightful it is then, after so long a journey through the tangled thickets of a speculative philosophy, to come back to the plain, simple teachings of the Bible, to leave all those unsolved mysteries behind us and content ourselves with the inspired declaration that God made man in his own image. I thank Mr. Darwin for whatever information he has imparted in his teachings, but I draw greater comfort from the Bible.